Hello everybody and welcome back to another Punishing Gray Raven video. Let's get into it. Alright, so here's the deal. With this video, we are going to be completing our top 3 unit series. I've already covered all of the other elements, so if you are curious about the Dark team, the Ice team, the Lightning team, Physical, and you want to know what those top 3 units are, you can go and check out that video. I'll have some links to those videos down in the description, but with this one, we are going to be completing the Fire team, guys, who are the top 3 fire units in Punishing Gray Raven. So why don't we jump into that? Before we do, make sure to drop a like and subscribe on the channel, guys. I would greatly appreciate that. Let's take a look at these units. First things first, we got to get this out of the way. Punishing Gray Raven is a team-based game. So when we're talking about the top 3 units, it's not necessarily going to be the top 3 DPS units, but we're going to be talking about the top 3 units for each of their respective roles. And those roles are tank, support, and attacker. Late game Punishing Gray Raven really does turn into one big DPS check when you're talking about the score attacks and when you're in war zone and trying to clear pain cage as fast as you can. It all comes down to DPS, but DPS doesn't matter if you can't stay alive. So that's why we're going to be looking at units that help bring a good balance to your team, that enable damage on your team, as well as also talking about some accessibility of characters, because maybe a character is really strong, but if it takes a lot or they're really expensive to use, are they really worth it? I don't know. That's a question you'll have to answer for yourself, and we'll talk about a little bit in this video. Before I mention any unit specifically by name, I will always say this game is about fun. So ultimately pull in the characters that you want to play with, or you think you're going to have the most fun playing with, or their waifu, or whatever is fun to you. Always do that first. That's where I've left it previously. But one additional discretion I do want to say is something you may want to consider is you don't want to be prevented from continuing the game by having like barriers of content that you are unable to clear. Being able to clear the content is a decently high priority, because if you get stuck, you're going to get bored. So I'm not trying to say you need to treat this video as gospel and that you need to follow exactly what I tell you in this video. It's just something to think about. You know, you want to be able to get to those higher stages, especially when it comes to just getting rewards. You know, the higher you are in pain cage, the more skulls you can get, the more you can enable your S rank characters. Always something to keep in mind. But without further ado, let's jump into the characters. And in our first category, where we're going to talk about tanks. Now, tanks is an interesting category when it comes to the fire element, because there are actually only 2 tanks currently in Punishing Gray Raven of the fire element, and they're both S ranks, which makes them kind of like equally as accessible, I guess you could say at this point. It is what it is. So let's take a look at our first contender. Our first fire tank unit we're going to look at is Nanami Pulse. Now, Nanami Pulse, being an S rank unit, she's also a first generation unit. She is able to be gotten through S-rank selectors. Even the first S-rank selector you get at the very beginning of the game for new accounts. You can get her through that method, but there are some other more valuable units in that selector. Her damage split is she is a 50-50 physical to fire, so fairly balanced in that way. And her core ability does allow her to switch into an overclocking mode where she does increased fire damage. Her core passive and QTE and ultimate also reduce fire resistance as well, and her signature weapon does also reduce fire resistance as well and increase fire damage. On her blue orb, she also does spawn a shield, which does help with a little bit of extra sustain. Next up, we've got Nanami Starfarer. Nanami Starfarer is a 2nd gen unit, so she does have the time stop buff. She will be on a future S-rank selector, but she's only going to be on that one and not on any of the other S-rank selectors, so she is a little more difficult to get compared to Nanami Pulse. Her damage split, however, though, is 100% fire, so in game modes where there's an elemental damage increase, that's huge. Like Nanami Pulse, her core ability allows her to switch into a rumbling mode, which allows her to do chain attacks with her basic attack ability, which then leads to a devastating ultimate blast. And at double S, which I know is a little more, she does get fire resist shred on her core passive in that rumble mode. And her signature weapon too also increases fire damage to the team when she's off field and adds additional fire resistance shred to her QTE. But she doesn't really have any sustain abilities. She's very damage focused for a tank unit. So, which leads us with the question, who is the better tank in this case? It's Nanami Starfarer. I know some of her resist shred is locked behind her double S, but if you farm up those different skulls from the pain cage and you unlock her double S, she just totally outpaces Nanami Pulse in terms of damage output. And like I mentioned before, late game punishing Grey Raven just turns into one big DPS check. Now I know I don't normally talk about signature weapons in these videos, but with some of the units in their roles, particularly the tanks, because they emphasize more on the resistance shred, the signature weapons are a little more important that way. So that's why I did mention it for the Nanamis in this case. But as I said before, Nanami Starfarer is going to be your first top tier fire unit in the tank role, and that's both for CN and Global. There's no other fire tanks that are currently available on the CN side that we haven't seen yet, so it's going to be her. On to our next category, which is going to be support. Our first A rank fire support unit is Sophia Silverfang. So being an A rank unit, Sophia is easier to farm and to get up to, double, triple S plus, just given time to be able to do that, which is always definitely a big bonus. Her damage split is 20% physical, 80% fire, which is a pretty good split when we're talking about the elemental damage teams. She is also able to group up enemies with her ultimate ability by dropping a big gravity well that deals fire damage over time. And then after using her basic attack, her 3-ping signature move or QTE, she leaves orbs on the field that can be picked up to heal your other team members. Next up, and our competitor for the support slot is Liv Imperia, my queen. Now, Liv Imperia is actually an amplifier and not a support unit, and amplifiers just give base attack and elemental damage increase just based on their class. Her damage split is 10% physical, 90% fire, which is higher than Sophia's, so you do get more fire damage. She's also a second generation unit, which does give her the time stop buff, which is really big. Speaking of the time stop buff and her ultimate ability, when it's executed correctly and you get a 333 ping on it, it does some crazy burst damage on the ability. Her core passive too also triggers a prayer mode, which allows her to do an additional burst of damage. And at double S, it allows you to chain that ability as well. And again, the double S is farmable from the pain cage. She also heals on her core passive, QTE, and her ultimate ability. So who's going to be the top support slot then? I think it should shock no one that it's Liv Imperia. As I said before, damage is super important, and the damage enabling that comes from an amplifier unit, especially Liv Imperia, who can do some crazy burst damage output herself, is just untouchable, especially when you compare it with Sophia, who the only additional thing that she has is a little bit of crowd control, because her healing, it doesn't even keep up with Liv Imperia's healing. Liv Imperia does heal for more, and based on her abilities, it's a lot easier to activate. Sometimes with the orbs, you have to run around and actually make sure you're hitting the orbs to be healed, which is just an extra step that's not something you want to be thinking about when you're trying to get to those higher stages. So Liv Imperia, bar none, is going to be taking that support slot. Now, in our final category, where we're going to be talking about the attackers, I'm going to be going a little bit quicker, maybe not giving as many details on each one because I don't want this video to be super long, guys. So we're just going to kind of stick to the basics and a little bit about the core passives on the characters, and we're going to try and fly through them a little more rapid fire. All right, here we go. First up, you know her, you love her. We've got Lucia Lotus. Lucia Lotus is free. She's the first unit you get in the game. Her damage split is 80% physical, 20% fire, which, I mean, can you barely consider her a fire unit at that point? But, well, she is, technically speaking. And her core passive is fairly easy to trigger. It's any 3-ping plus a red orb, which allows you to do some additional burst damage during that time. You guys know her. She's the first unit you get. You know, she's fairly straightforward. Next, we have Lee Palefire, an A rank unit. Lee Palefire being an A rank unit, farmable. So you know you can eventually get him to that triple S plus given enough time. His damage split is 20% physical, 80% fire, so pretty high percentage value there when you're talking about fire damage. His core passive is pretty easy to activate as well. It's just 1 yellow orb and 1 red orb, no 3-pings required, and it does allow you to do an additional burst of damage. So, you know, pretty easy when it comes to a playstyle perspective. He also does have an ascension that came in the last patch or two. I'm trying to remember specifically which one that was, which does enable his kit a little bit more to get more damage out of him. So pretty great from that regard. That's also farmable. Next, we have Karenina Blast. Now, at the time of recording, we are in the new Divide patch where Karenina Sire just dropped. So we should all be very familiar with her character at this point. Karenina is a very fun unit, great personality. Karenina Blast is an A rank unit with a damage split of 80% physical, 20% fire. So again, not a ton of fire damage on the elemental end. Moderate core passive where it takes three pings of any kind. There's no time requirement between them. It's just pinging three pings or matrix pings, which then allows you to switch into a ranged rocket damage mode where it allows you just to do consecutive fire blasts, which can have some pretty decent damage output and can be helpful for some of the more, stationary bosses. Karenina's back again with her S rank form where we've got Karenina Ember. Karenina Ember in her S rank is a little more expensive to get, but like Nanami Pulse that we talked about earlier, is available in the initial S rank selector that you get, and so all subsequent S rank selectors as well. But like Nanami Pulse before her, there are some more valuable units in that S rank selector, so it's not necessarily going to be your most optimal choice. Her damage split is 30% physical, 70% fire, which is pretty good, pretty high split there. Her core passive too, I'll say, is kind of like a moderate trigger in that just as you are using 3 pings or you're using her signature ability or her ultimate ability, it will charge that meter, which then allows you to activate it to do additional fire damage over a small period of time. So just kind of passively happens in the background, a little bit harder to manipulate to charge that bar faster compared to some of the other core passives that we've talked about. An honorable mention to end off our characters that are currently in the game, we do have one more to talk about in a moment, is Roland. Now Roland is an S rank unit, but he's a uniframe, so actually he's pretty cheap to get when it comes to getting new units. However, being a uniframe, he does get the debuff when he's mixed in a team with omniframes. His split is pretty good from a damage perspective, 20% physical, 80% fire, which is pretty high. And I will say he's one of those slightly more complicated units in that there's more combos that can actually be activated on his kit. I would say it seems like he's got one of the higher skill caps when it comes to characters in this game. So if it's something you're willing to put the time into, I think it could be a lot of fun to get that extra damage out there, especially if you've got him at a higher ascension. So that's it for global characters, but there's one more character we need to talk about who was released on the CN side, and that is Lee Hyperreal. Lee Hyperreal is a coming S rank unit, so obviously S ranks can be a little more expensive unless you've got a little bit of luck. He is a 2nd gen unit, so he does have a time stop buff as part of his kit. And from a damage split perspective, he's 100% fire, 100% fires. From an elemental team perspective, that's pretty great. His core passive is actually, while he's off field, 3 pings that are pinged by other characters on field charge his core passive, which then when he comes on the field, he can activate to do a high burst of damage. As well, his ultimate ability also allows him to do a big burst of damage as well as his QTE. So compared to the other categories, we've got 2 to look at. Who's going to be your top picked unit for currently in global, and who's going to be your top picked unit for in the future or on the CN side. When it comes to global, it's a little more complicated. Live Imperia and Nanami Starfarer just so far exceed the original fire units in the game that 3rd slot is really flexible actually, and just is there to really enable the full fire team rotation, but the kit themselves isn't actually super specific. I would say from just a low cost and farming perspective, that Lee Palefire is probably going to be one of your easier units that you're going to be able to build and put there if you don't have a 3rd fire unit available already. If you already have her and have her built, Karenina Ember can 100% fill that 3rd slot. And I would also argue, even though she's a tank, if you have Nanami Pulse, she could also fit in that 3rd slot, just again to help enable that rotation, because as it stands with Nanami Starfarer and Live Imperia, the other units don't really stand up from a damage perspective, so most of your damage is going to be coming from Live Imperia and Nanami Starfarer anyway. However, that is going to change with the inclusion of Lee Hyperreal. His burst damage potential just far surpasses the other fire units that are currently in the game. As well, his core passive works really well synergistically with Live Imperia and Nanami Starfarer. After rotating through Nanami Starfarer and Live Imperia, you should have triggered enough 3 ping orbs that when you switch to Lee Hyperreal, you can come in, activate his core passive for a burst, activate his ultimate ability and just do insane amounts of fire damage that, depending on the stage that you're operating on, depending on how they're built, you might not even get through a full rotation or just complete the rotation before you finish the clearing of the stage that you're currently on already. Lee Hyperreal is definitely going to be taking that third attacker slot. So quick rapid recap just to finish this video off. In the first tank slot is going to be Nanami Starfarer as your first fire unit. Your second fire unit is Liv Imperia in the amplifier / support role. And then your third unit on the global side is really flexible and can either be Lee or Karenina or even Nanami Pulse. But in the future, when he releases to the game, is going to be Lee Hyperreal in that top DPS slot. But that's going to be it for this one, guys. I hope you really enjoyed this one as we completed our top 3 unit series. In the future, I'll probably release maybe some addendum videos as more characters continue to drop on the CN side, like for example, Lamia, who just did a shakeup on the Dark team. But as we've done, those are the videos for you guys. If you've made it this far in the video, thank you so much. I would really appreciate a like and subscribe. That would be very helpful. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.